Peace and love, brothers and sisters. Welcome to an episode of Doran Cooks. I'm your host, Chef Doran, and today I'll be making a relatively playful dessert. You know, 'tis the season. Valentine's Day is right here, and fellas, if you want to do something to impress your ladies, this is going to be the perfect dessert for you to make for them to end the night off well. This is going to be a cheesecake tart. So it's not really a cake, but it's not really a tart. And this is something that I'm going to have fun making, so follow me and we'll make this together. Let's begin. First, we're going to get started on our crust for the tart. So here you're going to need a mixer. I'll leave my favorite mixer in the description below. I'll also leave a list of the utensils that you're going to need to complete this entire cake. So for now, you're going to need a mixer. You're going to need a bowl, of course, a paddle attachment, a spatula, and 2 pieces of cling film ready. All right? So we have 125 grams of whole wheat flour. We have about 32 grams of all-purpose flour sifted, 22 grams of light brown sugar, 2 grams of cornstarch. Oh, I'm sorry, not cornstarch, baking powder. You have 2 teaspoons of kosher sea salt, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 64 grams of granulated sugar, and last but not least, we're going to use 128 grams of cold cubed butter. And you're just going to mix that on the mixer for about a minute. So you kind of just want to form the dough into a ball. And I'm going to cut this right in half, down the middle. Transfer them both onto that cling film from earlier. Kind of just press down so we get a nice even roll when we're ready to use it. And as always, I would prefer that you leave this in the refrigerator overnight, but this is definitely ready to work with in at least an hour. All right, so now let's get started on the cheesecake. All right, so I have all my mise en place here ready to make this cream cheese base. We have to work quickly because it is time and temperature sensitive. So we want to put everything together so we can get it in the mold and put it right in the freezer. So I have an induction burner, which is optional. You can use a regular stove. And I have my mixer as well with a whip paddle attachment for this as well. All right, so the ingredients that we're going to use is 150 grams of softened cream cheese, 42 grams of sour cream, 62 grams of granulated sugar, a pinch of kosher sea salt, that's less than a gram, of the zest of 1 lemon, 1 gram of vanilla powder, and a ½ teaspoon of vanilla extract, 25 grams of lemon juice, 150 grams of heavy whipping cream that I have in my mixing bowl. And in this bowl over here, I have 1 gram of gelatin sheet. That's gonna be for the hot lemon juice that we're about to warm up. Okay, so now let's begin. So I have my softened cream cheese. And now to that, I'm going to add everything, my sour cream. I'm gonna add my sugar. I'm gonna add the vanilla bean powder, the salt, vanilla extract, and the lemon zest. Okay, I'm just gonna mix that stuff together. Now that gelatin sheet should be sitting in the water, cold water, for about maybe 10 minutes before adding that to the hot lemon juice, which we're about to put on the stove right now. Now we're mixing that together, making that base nice and creamy. All right, we have our lemon juice, which has come to a nice gentle boil. We're going to take that gelatin sheet out of our water and just squeeze any excess water that may be in the gelatin. Alright, and then we're just going to put that in our lemon juice. Swivel that around until it dissolves completely. Now we're just going to let that sit for a minute. We don't want it to add it directly to the cheesecake mix while it's still piping hot. So we're just going to give that a minute. And while we're giving that a minute, we're going to turn this up high and whip our heavy cream because we're going to fold it into the mix and then we're going to put it into our mold. All right, so our lemon juice with our gelatin is ready to go in. Okay. And then we take our heavy cream, which I've whipped to stiff peaks. Gonna add that all in there. This is the most important part because we're gonna add that aeration to the finished cake. So you just wanna kind of fold the base over the heavy cream, kind of smoothing it out. You're gonna fold and turn, kind of smoothing it out. And you wanna make sure that there's no heavy cream that isn't mixed into the cheesecake base. All the while we're aerating it. All right. Now once you've got that, I'm gonna take it over to our mold. I'm gonna put a little bit along the edges first because you want to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles on the bottom. Making sure that we fill up the mold down to the edges. And I'll leave a link in the description of where you can get this mold. Alright, now that we make sure that the edges are covered, and we can put more. And if you have any left over, you should have a few tablespoons left over. You can taste it. It's ready to eat. This stuff tastes delicious. This is a no-bake cheesecake. So now that we have our cake in our mold, I'm gonna put some plastic wrap over it, gently across the top. And we're gonna leave this to chill in the freezer for about 6 hours minimum before we start plating it and putting it together with the rest of the cake. All right, so next step, we're going to make our cherry compote to go in the tart shell. So here I have 225 grams of pitted cherries with the juice. I have 65 grams of granulated sugar, 27 grams of fresh lemon juice, and 4 grams of cornstarch. All right, so let me get my induction burner on. Get my cherries out. Beautiful. All right, and I'm gonna pour my sugar over my cherries. What this is gonna do is it's gonna draw the moisture out of the cherries as it cooks in its own juice. Now I'm just going to leave that for a minute, and as soon as it comes to a bubble, I will add my lemon's juice, which will already have the cornstarch mixed into it, and then we're gonna cook everything down for just a few minutes, all right? So we have our cherries that have finally come to a nice boil, and you see, just like I said, the sugar is what drew out all that excess juice. So now we have our cornstarch that has been dissolved in our lemon juice. We're going to add that to the mix. And we're just going to continue cooking this out for a few minutes. And as it cooks, the cornstarch is what's going to thicken it up. And then, yeah, let's check back with this in about maybe 2-3 minutes. All right, beautiful. In just a few minutes time, you can see that juice from the cherries thickened up into a nice syrup. It's delicious. It's lemony, it's sweet, and once this cools down, it's gonna thicken up a bit more, and it's gonna be perfect to pour into that tart. So there you have it, cherry compote. So we're gonna put this to the side to cool, and we're gonna get started rolling out our dough. All right, so now that our dough is chilled, we're going to start working with it. And if you've seen my apple pie video, then you've noticed this technique where I have the 2 rulers in the parchment paper. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to put my parchment paper over it, and we're going to try and keep it round as possible while we're rolling it out. I also have a greased tart mold. This, I'll also leave a link in the description for you to pick up. It's greased with just a little bit of butter. So I'm gonna take my French rolling pin now, and we're going to roll this out to about 1 centimeter in thickness. All right, so normally I would roll it out to the thickness of the rulers, but I actually want this dough to be slightly thinner. So we use those rulers as a guide. Now I'm just going to thin it out a little bit more. This is where some skill comes in, because you have to kind of feel and gauge where it needs to be rolled out more. All right. So we have nice, decent thickness on that. All right, so I'm gonna take my greased tart mold now, and I'm just gonna press down nice in the center of it. I got my greased tart mold in there. So now I'm just gonna take up that extra dough, because we're no longer going to need it. I would still keep this dough just in case your tart shell shrinks while it's baking for whatever reason. I like to leave just a little bit of dough just to do a little bit of surgery. So we're just going to take that dough up, remove our tart shell, and any imperfections around the tart, this is what I got my knife for, to just pick that apart, because if you don't, it's still going to bake like that, so you just want to take any loose dough around from the edges. Okay. So now we're going to put that ring mold back onto it. Pop that in the fridge, let that chill, and then we're going to get ready to work on the dough for the edges. Okay. So we have that second dough rolled out. And I'm going to use my 5-prong pastry cutter. Get some nice rolls. All right, I'm going to place this back. I'm going to leave this to chill in the refrigerator along with our tart bottle. And then when they're both chilled enough, we're going to put it together before putting it in the oven. All right, so we have both our doughs chilled, fresh out of the refrigerator. So I'm just going to put this tart shell ring mold back onto the base and just press down gently to make sure that it covers the same size as the base. All right. Now remember, this ring mold is greased already, so working quickly, we're going to take our second dough and we're just gonna kind of line it up against the walls. Like so. You might not need to use all of this dough, and if some of it rips, it's okay. That's why we have so much of it. All right, now this is the part where you reinforce around the bottom, and make sure you get that all around. And it's good that this dough is a little soft now since it's been out of the fridge already, because now we're gonna take a brush with a little bit of water and we're just going to run it along the edges where that base and the wall dough meet, so we can kind of seal in those cracks. Doesn't take much water at all. All right. So now we're going to put this to chill in the refrigerator one final time. And in the meantime, we're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And then we're just gonna trim this off in about 10-15 minutes and bake for another 15 minutes. It should be beautiful and golden brown. All right, so we have our tart shell done, our cherry compote is cooled down, and we have our cheesecake, which has been chilling in the freezer for over 6 hours now. So now that we have all these components, we're gonna get started on the chocolate mirror glaze. This is the last component to the cake, so let's get started. For this, I'm gonna need a pot. I have 210 grams of granulated sugar, about 145 grams of heavy whipping cream, 75 grams of water, 70 grams of black cocoa powder, 9 grams of gelatin, which I'm going to leave to the side, and I have 39 grams of water, which I'm going to pour over the gelatin. So now we're going to bring the rest of our ingredients up to temperature on the stove. At this stage, we're going to use our whisk. Now, once these ingredients come to a boil and the cocoa powder is fully dissolved, we're going to add our gelatin mix to that mixture, and then we're going to strain it into this container. We're going to use our immersion blender to zap it, and then we're going to strain it again. And then we're going to put the cling film over it so that it doesn't develop a skin on top. All right, so now that I've brought my chocolate mirror glaze to a boil, I'm going to add that gelatin powder. All right. I'm going to pass it through a strainer. Alright, so now we're going to buzz this using our immersion blender. And then we're going to strain it again. Okay. Now we're going to leave this out at room temperature to cool to about 94 degrees Fahrenheit, where we'll be ready to pour this over the cake and finally put this cake together. So I'm just going to place this plastic wrap over the top of it so that the surface doesn't develop a skin. And there's your chocolate mirror glaze. Now that we have our tart shell chilled, now we're going to take a paring knife and we're going to just run that blade across the top to cut off that excess pie dough. Alright, making sure no small little tidbits get left in there. All right, so once we clear away our scraps, I'm just gonna gently press along where we cut to make sure that there's no cuts visible, because this will bake like that and you don't want that, even though we will be shaving it down once we're done with it. But this is just to make sure that your pie shell bakes evenly and as perfect as you can. All right, so we have our beautiful tart out of the oven. It's semi-warm when I removed it from the ring mold. So now we're going to finish letting it cool, but first we're going to take a fine wire strainer and we're just gonna kind of polish off those edges, whatever imperfections. Kind of want to take our time and be gentle. Also making sure that it's relatively even. Beautiful. All right, so now we're gonna let this cool down completely, and yeah, we'll be ready to assemble everything together. The cake, the cherry compote, and finally the mirror glaze. All right, so we have everything ready to go. We have our tart shell, we have our cherries, plus 2 cherries on the side for garnish. We have our beautiful frozen cheesecake, and we have our chocolate mirror glaze, which is around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so first we're going to put our beautiful cherries into the tart shell. Beautiful. All right. Next, we're going to pour our chocolate mirror glaze over our cheesecake. Here we go. See my reflection in that, beautiful. So we're going to leave that to sit just for a moment, and then we're going to transfer it over to the tart, and there you have it. All right, so now the most delicate part yet, transferring this over. There we have it, our beautiful chocolate mirror glaze cheesecake tart with cherry compote. Beautiful. So we have our beautiful tart. Now, last step to taste it. Bring this down again. That's tasty. That's very tasty. You can tell the cheesecake is still slightly frozen, but it's good because once you leave that out at room temperature, it should really smoothen out. The cherry compote is tart, but it's very still delicious. It really helps bring the crust and the cheesecake together. The crust is a nice earthy undertone, and I think the mirror glaze, that chocolate, just adds that little sprinkle on top. So this is very delicious, something for you to make for Valentine's Day for your lover. Fellas, trust me, if you make this for her, she's gonna be really happy that you did. And then you're gonna be very happy that you did. So as always, like, share, subscribe, and please click the notification bell so you can stay up to date with all of the latest videos. I'm gonna sit here and eat this and then share this with my woman. Love y'all very much. Peace and love y'all.
I don't want nobody to cry for me. Being here is really not alive to me. I see the time slipping by from me. I feel the eye of society. I see the world got their eye on me. I see the snakes gon' lie on me. I see him pull a 6ix9ine on me. Testify on me. Try to get the rest of my homies. Try to put me in the skybox, in the sky, homie. They say, why you alive, homie? Not the working 9 to 5.